everyone, and welcome to Insight Edition. I'm so thankful you joined us today because we have Miss Faye Leggett. She is Bishop Leggett's wife, and we are so excited to hear all the great insight that she has to share. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. God's been good to me.
Yes.
Getting old is not what we thought it was, but He just keeps carrying me through, so I'm doing fine.
Well, you have certainly done it with grace.
Thank you.
Well, I am excited to ask you some questions. So I want to start off by asking you, how was your childhood? And what are some things that you did in your childhood and your spiritual experience? Let us know some of those things.
Okay. I was born in St. Paul's, North Carolina, but when I was about 9 months, we moved to Norfolk, Virginia, and that's where I was raised. Didn't have the greatest of home lives. My father drank a lot and was very abusive. And my grandmother would take me to church when I was a toddler up until I was about 7. We would ride the city bus, and she'd take me, and we would go to church. So she's the one that actually got me into church all my life, and she was my mentor up until the time she passed away. And now I can think back to some of the advice she gave me and how much some of it came true, and I didn't think it would, but it did. But then I got saved when I was 7 at the Norfolk Church, and was saved. Have been saved ever since. And so my childhood was spent in Norfolk Church, and until I went away to Homes when I was 14. And so that was, my mother finally got saved. When I was little, till about 9, Mother was not saved. But she became a Christian, and she taught a little boy's Sunday school class for about 20 years. And but my grandmother was my mentor, and I thank her for where I'm at today and where I have been. There was a lot of ladies in the church that mentored me too, and that my Sunday school teachers and Lifeline, what we call Lifeline, so they had such a great influence on me. So I pretty much was in church about all the time. So yeah.
That is wonderful. You got saved at 7. That is so great. You were so young, and thank goodness for your grandma. Thank the Lord for your grandma.
Thank the Lord. Even at 7, when God saved me, I knew, even at the age of 7, that He had a special place for me. And I felt that even when I was 7. So the Lord's always had His hand on me and took care of me, yeah.
Yes, He was getting you ready for all the great things.
Ready for something, yeah.
Yes. Well, tell us a little bit about how you met Bishop Leggett.
Well, I met him at Holmes Bible College. I was 14, and in the 9th grade, they had an academy there then. And he had just turned 17 and was in the 11th grade. And we dated for 5 years, and then we got married 5 years later after he graduated from the Bible college. So that's how I met him.
How neat is it that you guys went back to Holmes?
Yeah, we made a full circle.
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
That is amazing. And he was then the president of Holmes Bible College.
Yeah.
That is the neatest thing. Well, can you tell us about some of your early days of marriage and ministry?
The early days of the first thing we did after we got married is he went back to Holmes to teach. And of course there were those who thought he would always be at Holmes. And when he felt like God had called him into the pastorate, people came and thought, well, you're supposed to stay at Holmes. He said, no, I'm a minister that wants to be a pastor. And so we pastored there, and then we were there, and then we left and went to a little place called Swan Quarter. I don't know if anybody knows where that is, but it's down. You got one road in and one road out, and when the tide comes up and storms, it comes up in your house. Which God spared me that. I didn't have to worry with that. And we stayed there, but we had 2 churches, and we would stay there one Sunday, and another Sunday we would go and spend. This church about 45 miles away, and we'd go and stay all day. I had 2 small babies, so I had to take them, and we stayed all day. But it was a good time. It was a good learning experience. But then we left there and went to Pembroke, which is an Indian church, and I loved it. We stayed there 7 years, but the people were so good to us, and to this day I have such good friends. I had 3 to call me in the last week or so, and we enjoyed that. Saw so many people saved. And then we went to Falcon, and that was only place I said I do not want to go. And very well because I didn't feel adequate enough to be a pastor's wife at the Falcon Church. I looked at all the other pastors' wives and I thought, there's just no way. Because y'all know me well enough to know that I'm very, not outspoken, but I'm very transparent. And so, but anyway, but when we went there, I enjoyed it so much it became our home. Matter of fact, I still have a home in Falcon, which I'm fixing to sell, but that was where my children grew up, and it was a wonderful place for that. And then we left from there and went as superintendent for 3 years, and then to Oklahoma. But our marriage, God just put us together, and I'm not saying that because that's what happened. We knew the whole time God was putting us together, because there were times when we weren't sure we wanted to be together before we got married, and he would just come to us and let us know, this is what, I have a plan, and that's what the plan included for us to be married. So I feel very fortunate that I got to do all that.
Yes. Yeah, I bet there's a lot of ladies, a lot of pastors' wives who feel like you did. A lot of times they come in, they think, I'm not adequate enough to do this.
Yeah.
I bet everyone in there felt that same way at one point in their life. And then, look, you became Miss Faye Leggett, and we all know you now. And we're so thankful for that transparent quality that you have.
One of the things that someone said to me one time when I was over the ministers' wives in the denomination, just think, because being a pastor's wife I enjoyed more than anything, and I think we're going to get to that. But I enjoyed that, and they said, well, just think, you're the pastor's wife for all the pastor's wives in the denomination. And I thought, wow, I had never even thought about that. So the Lord's just been good, He's blessed me in so many ways. So.
Yes, that is really neat to think that you were at that place thinking I'm not good enough, and then God's like, I'm going to put you over all of these pastors' wives one day.
Well, I had to go through it when he became general superintendent. I had to spend a whole morning praying because I felt the same way. There's no way that I fit the bill to be a bishop's wife, and I'm not being modest. I really felt that, and I remember I was laying flat on my face on the floor in our room and saying, Lord, I don't know how I got to change. I mean, I might need to change, but I don't want to have to change. But he impressed on me, I have chosen you. I've never forgotten that. I have chosen you, I have called you, and I've called you by your name. And that's the reason you're here. And I thought, oh, Lord, but he promised to take care of me. And he did, and I enjoyed it so very much. And everybody fought and told the Lord for years why I shouldn't go to Oklahoma, but he just didn't pay no mind to me.
He doesn't like to pay us any attention when we tell him.
He knew what was best. Yeah.
He does,
Yeah.
and that's just amazing. That word from the Lord is what will encourage us and that's something you can hold on to the whole time. Even when everything's falling apart, you're like, I've got this word. And that's so encouraging. Well, tell us a little bit about raising kids in a parsonage. I've heard a lot of times that it's kind of like a glass house. And so explain to us the difficulties and the good things about it.
Well, it can become like a glass house, but the pastor and you have to change that. I never said to my children, you have got to behave a certain way because you're the preacher's child. I never felt like I should do that. And, you've got to do this because you're a preacher's child. No, you can't do that. He's your child. He's got to learn to do what he's supposed to do. And we would say, now, this parsonage is your home. I want you to treat it like it's your home. Don't tear it up. It's brand new. One of them was brand new. We had 4 children, 3 of them boys. So But my children somehow know that. And I think being raised in the Falcon Church did that, because you lived in the town where there were so many ministers and their children, until they didn't think they were any different than anybody else, and we wanted it that way. I didn't want them to think you grow up to be what you're supposed to be because you're supposed to be it. Not because you're a preacher's child, So
it's a great way to raise them with that mentality and that thought.
Yeah, I did okay, I guess.
You did. You certainly did. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like being the general superintendent's wife?
Well, Tim, we were talking about a while ago, James prepared me for being by myself now.
Yes.
And because he was gone all the time, unless I went with. When I did have the privilege, I used to, we first went there, the wives didn't travel as much. And then Brother Underwood understood that when I was traveling with James, the women were asking me to be a part of their meetings. And so he said, well, you take her everywhere you go, we'll just allow that. So I was so privileged to do that because I
Yes.
got to travel all over the place. Like I told somebody one time, my husband was the bishop of the whole world or something like that.
Yes.
And they came back at me. I said, well, that's what it feels like, But I after I got in there and realized, what it was all about, I enjoyed it. And I used to say, I thank the Lord that I got to be bishop's wife during that particular time. And I just enjoyed it. And we increased the Ministers' Wives Association until it became a busy something. Usually they just meet once in a while. But every meeting that James had with ministers, I had a Ministers' Wives meeting. And then I had one with the superintendent's wives. And I mean, preachers' wives and superintendent's wives and bishops' wives need loving. They need to have somebody to talk to because you don't feel like, I know I didn't feel like I could talk to everybody. And but we had a lot of prayers answered during that time, and you wouldn't be surprised. And we kept whatever was told, they kept it, and we prayed about it. A lot of miracles was brought about for these meetings, and I missed it so much after we left. I remember I was in Oklahoma when they had their first Ministers' Wives meeting, and I just cried all day long because I remembered how much I enjoyed it,
Yes.
But anyway, I got over that. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being bishop's wife. I enjoyed everything we did, but it was just a whole new world. And I got to see churches all over and how they worship. And I finally realized that they didn't worship like I did, or I didn't worship like they did, but boy, I enjoyed it, So it made an impression on me, yeah.
I'm so glad y'all got to travel together.
Yeah.
Because you are a unit. You're both doing ministry together. And look at all the ministry you did. While he did his ministry, you were doing ministry.
Yeah.
I think it's so great that you helped to implement that and to grow that because we need it in the body of Christ. The pastors' wives need to know
They do.
that they are just as important and what they're doing is just as important.
Well, I heard psychologists tell one of our minister's wives that the minister's wife is the most lonely person in the world because her husband's busy, he has people, and she has no one to really, she can't talk to church people. That's a mistake.
Right.
But this was a Methodist preacher's wife that I heard say she was having emotional problems, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have that. Then I got to thinking, but I could have it if I allowed myself to be that way. But they're the loneliest people, and that's the reason now I'm so glad that the husband and wife are such a part of each other, and that she's as much a part of the church as he is.
Yes.
I mean, she don't have to go and just sit and clean the church or watch the children. She's a part of what's taking place in that church. So this is a new day, and that's good.
Yes, and you have helped to usher that in, and
Well,
so that's
I
a
don't know,
great.
I hope so, but I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yes, definitely so. Well, can you tell us about, we know about Bishop Leggett, the man and the preacher. Well, we know about him as the preacher and the Pentecostal leader, but we want to know a little bit about Bishop Leggett, the man.
Well, he loved tomatoes. Chris Thompson was a friend of ours because he shipped us tomatoes because Chris grows such beautiful tomatoes. And he shipped us tomatoes all the way to Oklahoma every year. We had tomatoes. I need to call him. He's let down on me. But anyway, James was a gentle and not big, and I'm not flattering. I'm telling the truth about him. He was a gentleman. He was a gentleman with his children. He was a gentleman with me. And he was with the ones that he was working with. Now, if he needed to be firm, he could be it. But our children, since he's passed away, we sit around and talk about him all the time. I know his ears is burning. But our children said I would call and I'd be so upset, and I wanted him to give me a solution to what was going on. And one of his favorite things is, if you just wait long enough, it'll work out. And they said, I don't want to hear that. But that was the way he thought. Don't you get upset. Don't you run off at the mouth. Just wait long enough and it'll work out. He was the same way with me. But he loved fishing, he loved to golf, and he was hoping that when we moved to Myrtle Beach that he'd get a chance to play golf because we live on a golf course. And of course he didn't get to because he was sick. But, and he just loves people. I never saw anybody that loved people like James Leggett loved people. I mean, we'd go into Walmart and he'd find somebody and find out who they were and how long they'd been in the world and all of this because he just loved to talk. And the children say, Mama, don't let Daddy get nowhere talking. We can't go anywhere. But he would just love people. He loved the people he worked with. And he was just that kind of man. Had a shepherd's heart. He just had a shepherd's heart. And
you can definitely tell because when he was at Holmes, all the kids loved
Yeah.
him and you. They loved you guys together.
Yeah.
They just, the way they talk about him, even now, they still talk about him as if he's still here and they just saw him yesterday. It's just that love for
Yeah.
him and you both.
And if they came in discontented and wanted to quit, I've seen him talk. Even some of your young men from this conference, which we thank God for.
Yes.
They were some of the best students we'd ever seen, and I mean they were just good students. And that's to Tim and Mara Smith, and I just appreciated them coming to. I mean, it just made such a difference in our school when they got there. But we loved him, and he could not stand the idea of one coming in and saying, I can't come back because I don't have the money. He would make a way that that student could come back because it was important. And one of the things they would say to him is, I appreciate you loving me enough not to kick me out or stuff like that. And he had a hard time when somebody did something they should have been kicked out for. And he would go to the nth degree before he would have to, kick them out. But because sometimes they just had to be,
Yeah.
But, yeah, and we loved it. I mean, he's just that kind of person. And so,
Yes.
yeah.
You could tell definitely by how he acted and just was, even when he got down from the pulpit,
Yeah.
that he always exemplified that. And to know that he was that way at his house and he was that way
Yeah.
all the time, that was his character. That's something that's just amazing to know.
Well, if you don't believe it, you talk to his grandchildren and his children, his grandchildren. To this day, I mean, when he passed away, that it was just terrible for them because he was such a steadying force for all of them, and
Yes, so
Yeah.
beloved by
Yeah, he
so
was.
many,
Yeah.
so many. Can you also tell us a little bit about, you were talking about your kids and you have raised greatness for sure. Can you
appreciate it.
tell us some of the accomplishments and things that they have done?
Jimmy, our oldest son, he's probably the one that people don't see as much. He's a Christian. The Lord brought him in, and he's a Christian. He works in the nursing home business. He works for a company that's over the maintenance of the nursing home. They go in, and he's like in a district, and he goes in to different nursing homes. He travels from one end of North Carolina to the other. And he is very quiet, a lot like his daddy. But and I just felt like, which I may have called him to preach, but I just felt like he should have been the preacher. But to this day, he says, no, that was not. But he's an influence on who he works with because so many of them drink, and they call him their designated driver. He's the only one that doesn't drink. But he's just a gentle person, too, and we love him. And since when his daddy was sick, and after he died now, he comes and sees me every Sunday. And we sit and watch golf and sleep. and then Joey, of course, we know Joey. He's director of the children's home, and it is just remarkable how God has used him and his board to bring, because the doors were fixing to close. That's the reason James didn't want him to go. And but God has used him and the board, the people he's had with him, and the miracle that's taking place at that children's home. He's had favor with God. God's just found favor, with him. But we appreciate he's very outgoing, and we just appreciate that. And then Cindy, our only girl, and I don't know how much you know Cindy. Cindy's the hoot of the family. She's very funny, tries and very happy. But she teaches in a Baptist church preschool, and they allowed her as Pentecostal to come in and teach Bible to their students and to their staff, and so that's what she's been doing once a week. She does that once a week. Cindy was married to a minister, but it did not work out, and she was a good minister's wife. And but anyway, she's just, I don't know what I'd do without her. And then John, our youngest, and it's hard to say youngest because he's just turned 50 years old, which means I'm oldest. But anyway, he pastors a church in Wichita Falls, Texas. He started with 60 people, and he's running close to 800.
Wow.
Right now, the virus has kept him back down some, probably like all the other churches. But there again, God just has used him and in a marvelous way. And I just thank the Lord that they, and that they have always been there and trusted God to use them. And even when they were not where they ought to be, they knew where they were supposed to be, and they came back. But we got 11 grandchildren, and now I'm fixing to have my 6th great-grandchild.
Wow.
And I know all of them's going to be in ministry. I know one of my grandsons is, but yeah.
Yes, I bet it's that influence that you guys lived before them, and how you protected them in that glass house that we were talking about. How you were just like, you're regular kids. You don't have to do anything different. That what you guys instilled in them, definitely you can see now. And
they knew that if they got into trouble, I mean, there would be church members that would be cruel to them, but they knew that we had their back, because they could lie, but we would still have their back until we got them, found out. But we were not going to let anybody, just because you're the preacher's child, do that. But they're good kids, and we've enjoyed them so much. Yeah.
Yes, they are, and they're good adults. You can definitely tell they are.
We have a ball when we're together. We really, James would just shake his head when we all get together.
That is too funny. I really love to hear those stories. Can you tell me, what was your favorite ministry role that you've ever been a part of?
Pastor's wife. I loved being a pastor's wife. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, I only say what I feel. I just love the individual contact with the church people and being a part of their family, and I just enjoyed going to church, and I just enjoyed it, and I had a good preacher. So it was wonderful to be a part. And I would say to James, now when we get through in Oklahoma, we're going to go back and be a pastor. And he would look at me like, is that what you want to do? And I'd say, that's what I want to do. So we didn't go home. We went to Greenville. And then we acquired the church there as he was a pastor. So I became the pastor's wife, and I taught the college students. I fixed breakfast for them on Sunday morning, and I had a ball, and we just enjoyed it so much. And so I got to be the pastor's wife. But God has a plan. He sees what's going to happen.
Yes.
He saw what was going to take place, and James needed to be at homes. And so,
I love that. I love that God, he knew what he was doing, and I'm so thankful that he did get to be at home. So that legacy that he has and all that was in him, he passed it down to another generation of preachers, and so that's very exciting.
Loved homes,
I remember I did everything virtually, and so listening to his classes online, he would always teach us, and then he would get so excited about a point that we would always get a little bit of preaching in there.
Oh, yeah.
And that was my favorite. I would wait for the moment when he would start to preach, because it was always, he was just so good.
Yeah.
Every lesson was so
Appreciate
good.
it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed him.
I told him I was fortunate I got to be under the best preacher in the world.
You did.
Yeah,
You did.
That's how I felt, yeah.
He never preached a bad sermon.
No.
Every sermon he preached was straight
See,
from
I
the
just
throne.
didn't do it this morning. I said, you didn't do what this morning? And, he thought he'd flub, and probably all pastors feel that way. They flubbed it up. But I never saw that. Even when he was sick, he preached just like that, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he always did. I remember we did have a service when he was sick, and they were like, he preached the fire down. You would have never known he was sick.
Yeah.
I love that.
I remember talking about y'all's boys. We went down to Martin Jackson's church. James was really, really sick. And the boys had not seen us since we left school. And, of course, when James came in, he had changed so much, and they had operated on his head, and his eye was closed, and he couldn't hardly talk. And I thought, He's not going to make this, but he did. He got up and preached. But I remember those boys were sitting on the bench, Joel and Zach and a bunch of them, and when they turned and saw him coming up there, they just put their heads down and just wept because they loved him that much, and he loved them that much. But yeah.
Yes, they did. Yeah. They definitely did love him that much, and I know that he did too.
Yeah, he
that
did.
feeling was mutual.
He did. He loved him. If he had not gotten sick, we'd probably been at homes till he was 100 or more.
Yes, I'm sure.
And I was fine with it. I was fine with it. Yeah.
Those boys would not have let you guys leave.
No. And these boys come by and take me out to supper and come see me with their girlfriends, because one of them's girlfriends from the church there at Greenville. And so they have not forgotten. They come by and, check. And so that shows you good things about them, too. So,
it does.
Yeah.
It does. And about you, because you made that impression.
Well, I don't know, but I loved them. That's all I knew to do,
Well, what kind of advice would you give to future ministers and people coming up in ministry, and even ministers' wives? What advice would you give to them?
Be yourself. That's my pet peeve, is ministers and their wives who try to be somebody else. And I've seen that happen, and you can't do it.
Right.
You can't do it. Be yourself. If God's called you, he will give you what you need to be yourself and to preach. And I told a young man, he's married to my cousin, he's trying so hard to be like another minister, and I said, you're such an excellent preacher and pastor. Why are you trying to be like somebody else? And then keep the communication open. As we've talked about, ministers' wives are lonely because their husbands are always communicating, and so many times, but then they needed to communicate with each other.
Yes.
That was my favorite time, the whole time we were married, is when he'd come home and we'd sit down and go through the day, and he would tell me some things that happened at the board meeting, and he said, I told you because I knew you'd keep it. I said, yeah, but I'd like to do something about it, but I kept it. But anyway, but that was even up until the time he died, the time of communicating with one another. If you keep that communication open and treat her like she's as equal as you are, and don't put her down because you're the preacher and she's the preacher's wife, and teach your children to love the Lord, and they're not any different because they're preacher's children. So yeah, I had one more, but I forgot it. So.
That's okay. That's
I'd written
great.
it down. Yeah, being yourself, and I taught that when I taught the ministers' wives across the denomination. Quit not being yourself. Take your mask off, and be who you are, and God will help you.
Yes, because God called you. He knew who you were.
Well, he told me about it. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's such good
I'm
advice.
just so excited I get to tell this stuff again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I love to hear it. I think it's so encouraging.
Yeah.
Because you've seen so many different things, and you've been through so many situations, and it's encouraging to younger ministers and younger ministers' wives to know these things. So I'm thankful you shared. Well, I want to ask you one last question, and this is my favorite question. What is the most miraculous thing you've ever seen God do?
Homes. We saw a lot of miracles as far as illness and as far as meeting our needs. But when I went to homes, I actually saw what miracles were. We went there, and there was one building there, and I'm thinking, we made a mistake. And James would say, I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build that. And I thought, they had no money, and the church had no money, hardly any people. But you've been to the church. It's a beautiful church. And he would not build until he had the money to build it. He would not leave them in debt. And he would get up, and these young men, I'm so glad, has got to be a part of that, where you actually saw day by day God perform a miracle. And he would say to the students and to the church, we have got to have this miracle by a certain time. Those students would get out and walk the grounds. They would pray. They would pray clock around because they believed God. And he would work a miracle. And James would get up there and say, this happened and this happened. And I'm sitting there thinking, I have never seen such miracles like this. And I call it the miracle school. And I call
Yes.
it the holy ground because when you walk up on it, that's what. And I'm so glad I was a part of that, and that we now have a school there. We need students. We need to, we got students, but we need for it to keep building. But that
Yes.
is probably the biggest miracle, or the greatest miracle that I had experienced.
That really is. And you showed those young people
That's
the
right.
power of prayer
Yeah.
and asking God and believing him, and that is an amazing miracle, and I'm glad that they were there to witness it.
That's right. I mean, they came to learn, and that was one of the greatest gifts or greatest lessons I'm sure that they learned,
Yes, because they saw it in action.
in action. That's
That's
right.
wonderful.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank you.
being
I appreciate
here.
it.
Yes, you have blessed me, and I know that she's blessed all of you. And so we thank you for watching, and make sure you tune in every Monday at 7 o'clock for the next Insight edition.